universe began, light has remained unchanged. Now, man has created a new kind of light with powers and properties unlike anything that existed before. Laser light.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the 0x2C podcast. This is Ryan.
And this is John. Hello.
And sort of the recap from last week, I went over skin disease that was found worldwide in dolphins. And John, you want to go ahead and tell what you talked about?
Yeah, so it turns out there's like a type of hearing loss, or the large majority of permanent like deafness is hereditary. There's a genetic component, and with some novel gene therapy methods, it might be possible to cure that. Although it's only been done in mice, but it's already promising that they could move to humans.
Yeah. So with that being said, today we're going to go into my article, since last week we started off with John, and so we always flip-flop. And so, yeah, I guess the title of this article is What are Quarks and Gluons? So,
all right.
Yeah, and I know, John, this is like sort of your, this is your, I guess your
you give me too much credit. You give me too much credit.
This is your type of like favorite taste in physics. But okay, so what are quarks and gluons? And this is by the U.S. Department of Energy. And,
wow. Okay.
Yeah, and so the site I got it from was SciTech Daily, and yeah. So the reason why I picked this article was because I did not really know about quarks and gluons. I knew they existed. I heard of them, the words thrown around, like if John was talking to me about it in quantum mechanics or anything. If we talked about physics, sometimes it'd be thrown around. And so I was like, oh, okay, this is cool. This is a cool article that's going to sort of maybe teach me about what are these and why do they exist. So yeah, John, do you want to like maybe give? Don't go too deep because I gotta. I still gotta.
No, I know. So I think like a good overview that I don't think will ruin your article is I think you can literally go on the streets and you can ask someone, well, not during COVID, right? But maybe post-COVID, you could ask like, okay, what's an atom consist of, right? The atom is like even the Greek word like atom means like smallest unit or indivisible. And you'd ask them, okay, what are atoms made of? And they would tell you electrons, protons, and neutrons. But what most people don't really know is that your protons and neutrons are actually made of even smaller particles, which we would consider the quarks. And you mentioned gluons, and their name is already a hint to what they do. They literally glue these quarks together. I'll stop right there. I think that's a good overview.
Yeah, that was like perfect. So this leads straight into what John was talking about with quarks and gluons. These are known to be the building blocks of protons and neutrons, and so which in turn are the building blocks of atomic nuclei. And I'm pretty sure maybe you learned this in high school or wherever maybe wherever you're from, you learned this in in your traditional education about what makes up an atom. And you have your protons, neutrons, and electrons, right? And see that's where I thought like, okay, we're taught sort of those are sort of the building blocks, but now when you get sort of higher in the education, you learn about these quarks and gluons. Which wait, John, did you know about this stuff, previously?
Yeah, I mean, but I was a huge nerd back in like elementary and middle school, so I was like, oh wow, cool. But you're right though. For introductory chemistry, you will learn like you need to know your electrons and neutrons and protons. But once you like that will carry you through the rest of your career. I think most chemists don't really have to worry too much about gluons or quarks.
Okay, and yeah, so I guess more stuff about the atomic nuclei. Maybe you didn't know, John. Let's see. It was discovered by Ernest Rutherford based on the 1909. Geiger-Marsden gold foil experiment. Does that sound familiar?
You shoot alpha particles at a piece of gold foil, or was it alpha or was it like electrons? But
yeah, you shoot. I didn't look into the experiment, but I know that you shoot something into the gold foil and it like bounces off certain.
Right. Well, the original theory back then was that the particles should just go through, but what actually happened was like a small percentage of those like would go like straight back towards the particle beam. and that's how they had to revise the actual model of the nucleus. I'm vaguely familiar with the experiment, but this is good review. This is good review.
Yeah, maybe after the podcast, I need to look up
Yeah,
the
yeah,
actual
definitely.
experiment. But yeah, I even remember learning this in biology, because
Biology. Why?
yeah, because I took biology before chemistry. So in high
Oh,
school,
wow.
yeah, so
Okay.
I took chemistry in what was like one of my last classes. It's really weird, but
Huh.
yeah, and so oh yeah, and the protons, neutrons, and electrons, of course, bounded by electrostatic force, and almost all the mass of an atom is located in the nucleus. So these are some facts that I found online.
Okay.
And so the term nucleus is from the Latin word nucleus, a diminutive of nux or nut, meaning the kernel inside a watery type fruit. So yeah, so they sort of an analogy they would give this is that you have a peach, you have the nut inside, and then the shell is sort of like if you were to compare an atom with a fruit.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Wow. I didn't know the Latin origin because I would have guessed Greek because I'm pretty certain the word atom is Greek in origin.
Okay. Yeah. So this is nucleus. So is nucleus?
Okay. Well,
Do you think nucleus is from Greek origin?
well, I mean, sometimes I'm not a linguist here, but I'm pretty certain there are times where there's Greek and then the Latins take in the Greek and it becomes Latin, over time. But uh,
Gotcha.
I think what you said is right though. But I don't know. I mean, this is a new fact for me, like the etymological origin of that word. That's super cool.
Yeah, I thought it was pretty fun. I guess like a fun analogy to if a kid were to ask me like, oh, can you show it to me like physically? I would probably grab a peach or an apple.
Yeah, get a
Not really
fruit.
an apple, but peach. Yeah. But anyways, so yeah, these fundamental particles are the oh yeah, so quarks and gluons. These so from I guess the fundamental particles are the only one to have a characteristic called color change. Does that okay? Okay, cool. And so not only does the atomic nuclei consist of positive and negative charges, quarks and gluons contain 3 additional states of charge. Do you wanna do you think you know these
Yeah,
three?
sure. Let's see. Let's see if I can explain it from memory. Feel free to stop me if I get it wrong. So,
Okay.
the way I want to introduce this to the people watching is you mentioned charge and colored charge. I think it's a little confusing. So, why don't we just quickly remember that in a normal atom, electrons have a negative charge and protons have a positive charge. But when we talk about gluons, there's an additional property that acts very much like a charge. So what does charge do for us? Well, charge dictates whether or not certain things are attracted to each other or whether or not they repel. So for quarks, there's a color based, and keep in mind, when we say color, it's not because quarks actually have color. They don't have color. You cannot see. But for our human brains, we like to ascribe colors to these individual quarks. So there's red, green, and blue, and there's also anti-colors as well. So you get cyan, magenta, and yellow. So that's like we have antiparticles. There are anti-colors as well for quarks.
Oh wow, I didn't know about anti-color.
Yeah,
So
that's the thing.
anti like not color. So
I don't know if it's called anti. That's how I remember it. But basically, each color has an opposite color, and they attract each other. So
interesting.
oh well, I'll save this for later. I think you're about to explain like what exactly protons and neutrons are like, what kind of configuration they have.
Oh wait, you can go ahead and explain that. I think you would explain it way better than what I can.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there are actually, I think there are 6 kinds of quarks. I might be wrong on the exact number. Up, down, strange, charm, and up, down, strange, charm. There's 2 others that I don't remember off the top of my head, unfortunately.
Yeah. Okay. So there's up, down, charm, strange, top, and bottom.
Okay, there we go. So for protons and neutrons, there actually consists of 3 quarks. I forget which one is which, but one of them is 2 up quarks and 1 down quark, and the other one is 2 down quarks and 1 up quark. And those make up essentially a proton and a neutron. And if you learn more about particle physics, you'll know that a neutron can actually decay into a proton and an electron. And it turns out that if you look on an even smaller scale, it's because one of the quarks ends up changing.
So yeah, they were. So I looked at a little history about them. So they were discovered in 1979. Experiments at the DESI laboratory in Germany provided the first direct proof of the existence of gluons by John Ellis. So John Ellis was a theorist, a physicist.
When you
theorist.
say gluons, you're saying that we found the glue before we found the actual particles, right?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. I didn't know that.
And so this okay. So I guess I'm going to tell you a little story about how of Ellis recounting what allowed him to come up with this experiment in in discovering gluons, which I mean, to even think about that though, like of an experiment to find what glues together, atoms is sort of like you would
Right.
just walking down the street, you don't really think about that. But I mean, I guess that's why we have these physicists that are out there, these theorists that are they do what they do. So he was walking over the bridge from the CERN cafeteria back to his office, and turning the corner by the library, when it occurred to him that the simplest experimental situation to search directly for the gluon would be through production via Bremsstrahlung in electron-positron annihilation. And
Bremsstrahlung. I know what you're talking about. I think it's not Cherenkov radiation. There are two famous types of radiation. Most physicists. Cherenkov radiation is the blue glow that you see when you stick a nuclear rod into water, and you see that blue glow and react. That's Cherenkov radiation. Bremsstrahlung radiation is like X-ray. I think it's like an X-ray radiation from when an electron hits. I should know this from prior physics, but it's been so long. But keep going.
That's okay. Really cool. Yeah, I didn't know there's two different types of radiations, right? So
they're probably more types, but these are like Cherenkov's the one I know the best, just because if you ever see those pictures inside a nuclear reactor and there's that weird blue glow from the reactor, it's called Cherenkov radiation.
Oh wow. And so in this process, an electron and a positron would annihilate, and it would occasionally produce three jets of particles, and they put quotations jets, one of which being generated by a gluon radiated by a quark anti-quark pair.
Ah, okay, wow.
So, and then now I guess we go into what is the force that holds these particles together? Because there's different types of forces, right? In nature, we have gravity. We have the
four fundamental forces.
Oh, I'm sorry, four. Yeah, right. So we have the gravity, we have strong nuclear forces, we have electromagnetism, and the weak nuclear forces.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. And so I guess I'll give some examples of weak nuclear forces, because I think we sort of have a good idea of at least what gravity feels like, because we're on Earth.
Gravity and electromagnetism are very familiar. We have an intuition for it. I think it'd be great if you could explain the strong and the weak nuclear force to those in the audience.
So let me give some examples of weak nuclear forces, and some of them are beta decay, which a neutron disappears and is replaced by a proton, an electron, and a neutrino. So that's one example. And they're weak nuclear forces are found to play a role in nuclear fusion, which and then so the strong nuclear forces are gluons, right, John?
Right.
So it's stronger than gravity and all I think electromagnetism and all the other forces, basically, if I remember.
Depending on the scale is pretty important here. Okay. Gravity's super weak at certain, but as you mentioned, the strong nuclear force at certain scales definitely overrides the others. But yeah, it sounds about right.
Okay.
Oh, and I think sorry. One of the things I wanted to add is you mentioned the strong nuclear force, and you mentioned gluons. One of the things people should know. So these four forces are known in physics as the four fundamental forces. They govern all the matter and all the matter around us. And each of these forces, at least three of them, have what we call a mediator particle. So for the strong nuclear force, that's the gluon, as you mentioned. For the weak nuclear force, there actually, if you look at the standard model, I encourage you all to look that up if you want, but the standard model is almost like a periodic table, but it's for different particles. And there are several particles responsible for the weak nuclear force. And then electromagnetism, that's the humble electron slash, or that's the photon. That's the photon. If you want to look up there's math behind each force, right? So for electrons or electromagnetism, you might want to look into QED, quantum electrodynamics, that was pioneered by Feynman. And for what you're talking about, gluons and quarks, you can talk about quantum chromodynamics. That's like the math behind or the force governing those interactions.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. So
there's the mediating particle, but one of the greatest questions in physics is gravity is kind of the weird, like the odd child of the family. It doesn't fit in with the other three forces, and for century, I think maybe over a century now, physicists have been trying to figure out, okay, how do you get gravity to fit in or play nice with the other three forces? Because gravity, I mentioned there's like mediating particles, right? So electromagnetism is photons. The strong force is, I think, gluons. The weak force is like these certain other mediating particles. But gravity, we've never seen a graviton. A graviton would be the proposed particle, but we haven't seen experimental evidence of this. So
that's weird, huh?
Yeah, it's yet to be seen, or it may not exist at all. We don't know.
Yeah. Like, what even is gravity? I remember watching like YouTube videos on them trying to explain, because gravity is sort of, it's there. We can feel it. It's sort of, but like, that's
it's one of the things that, like I mentioned earlier, right? Like in our daily lives, right? The two forces we'll probably deal with the most are electromagnetism, like for the light, for the audio, the internet that's transmitting our information here, and gravity, which is gluing us to the ground right now. But when you really get into the nitty gritty of gravity, it really becomes a very convoluted topic. Like
it can even go like philosophical. When people talk about gravity, I've seen I don't know. But,
okay.
But what's really weird also is that I think we know. It seems like we know much more at smaller scale, like like with gluons, quarks, neutrons, protons. But with gravity,
I think we know a lot about both realms. I would argue the problem is, I think the real problem here is trying to get them to play nice. Physicists don't like the fact that general relativity, there's certain parts of physics that don't really play. They don't really interact well. There's a misconception that so we can't get quantum mechanics to work with relativity. That's not true. In fact, you will in higher division physics, you'll learn about relativistic quantum mechanics, where you remember the Schrödinger equation, Ryan? I think.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. So that's like basic physics. But what happens is the Schrödinger equation is for a very ideal scenario where the particle isn't really moving quickly. But in the real world, particles can move at 99% the speed of light, and we need relativistic mechanics there. And there's a derivation, I think it's called Dirac's equation, and there's another equation as well that explain, like, they integrate relativistic mechanics. But it's what I'm trying to get at is gravity is just a royal pain in the butt for many. It does not play nice a lot of times. Like I think I mentioned in string theory, that's why we want string theory. We want to be able to unify these different mathematical frameworks for explaining the universe. At the edge of black holes, we're trying to figure out what happens there. General relativity says one thing, but quantum mechanics says another thing, and they don't seem to line up where we would expect them to. So string theory should hopefully explain that. But once again, string theory
couldn't, right? That's the
string theory has a lot of really nice stuff, but we don't know if it's like a proper representation of the universe. That's the thing. It has a number of requirements that we have yet to observe. Not to mention that string theory has 10, like the number 10, with an exponent of 500, 10 to the 500 different solutions. So we need to find the solution that explains our universe, and we haven't found that yet. So we don't know if it's possible or not.
And there's a recent article on I think SciTech Daily.
Oh, wow.
They talked about they used AI to try to solve this Schrodinger equation.
Oh yeah. I saw the headline for that. I didn't actually read the article. For those, I think I'll like just tell chat, and then I'll let you go on, Ryan,
Okay.
because I know I'm super hyped. You can tell it's a topic I'm very excited about.
Yeah,
But Schrodinger's equation is, for those that aren't too mathematically inclined, it's a second order partial differential equation. And it's doing it by hand. To solve or use Schrodinger's equation, you have to set up the environment your particle is in. And for introductory physics, there are different environments you can set it up for, like for a sphere, so a hydrogen atom, or for a well, a potential energy well. But as you try more and more complicated setups, like maybe you try and do a beryllium atom, so that has more electrons and a denser nucleus and all that stuff, the equation gets harder to solve. Differential equations, by their nature, are very painful to solve. Even computers, like it takes a ridiculous amount of time to solve them, even with the best computers. So,
yeah.
all right, that's.
Yeah, I mean, differential equations are hard to solve. That there's so many different techniques you can use on them, but they sometimes lead to uglier solutions.
Yeah. Ansatz, like you make a guess and then you have to like fine tune the guess, and there are like the history of differential equations. It's always like try and convert it into a form you can work with, and then once you have the form, there are like different test solutions you can plug in and manipulate, and it gets nasty real quick. But
Okay, so we talked about all these like forces, and now how do we separate these quarks and gluons? So the according to this article, the only way to separate these particles, maybe a different way, I don't know, but the only way to separate these particles is to create a state of matter known as quark gluon plasma. And so what is plasma? I guess the question is for me when I first was reading this, I'm like what it's an electrically conducting medium in which there are roughly equal numbers of positively and negatively charged particles produced when the atoms in a gas become ionized, and this is also known as the fourth state of matter. So, John, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I mean that sounds pretty much spot on. So when we say ionize, what we mean is like, okay, so you've got your atom. Atoms normally have their electrons floating around it. So what you do is you literally strip off the electrons. No longer are localized to your nucleus, and as a result, you have these this goop, as I like to think of it, of these all these charged particles. They're no longer confined to their own individual spheres and everything. Yeah, and Ryan's right. It is the fourth state of matter. I remember saying that over and over in elementary school just to try and sound smart. Now I realize I was being a real pain in the butt, like showing off. But yeah, I think that's a good explanation. Quark plasma. For plasma, quark gluon plasma is a more nuanced definition, though.
Yeah, and it's funny because in elementary school, all I knew was just like solids, liquid, gases. I never heard of this fourth state.
And many people will go about their lives just knowing those. I mean, that's all they really have to worry about.
But yeah, because I mean, I guess every day, you don't see plasma just leaking off someone's faucet or something.
Right. Or I mean, unless you own like those plasma globes, you put your hands on it and there's like the tendrils. I used to have one of those, and then I broke it. So.
Wait, did the liquid spill out?
No, I mean, well, plasma globes don't have liquids in them, right? It's just noble gases, I think, that get ionized. But but I shattered. I broke the. I shattered. I accidentally dropped it, and it broke the external. But once I broke it, I looked how it worked in the inside, so I took it apart, and it for those that are curious, it has the same or similar high voltage circuitry as an old television set does. So it's something called like a flyback transformer, which is responsible for like generating very high voltages. You see the same thing in a plasma globe.
Wow, I was thinking about lava lamps. The liquid inside lava lamps.
Lava lamps.
Yeah.
Okay.
For a minute.
I mean, those don't have plasma. It's a cool cool effect that I think exploits the sort of Actually, I'm not sure how I would describe how they work, but I think it's like viscosity, like water and oil, right? There's like a natural hydrophobic nature of oil. Yeah, there we go. I think I would put it that way.
Some hydrophobic thing going on in there.
Yeah, definitely. I mean,
Yeah. Okay. And then yeah, so some quark and gluon facts that I to sort of wrap this article up. So there are 6 different kinds of quarks, which we talked about earlier, with wide range.
wait, what about the experiment you were telling me about? How did they?
Which experiment? The one
The
from
one you told me where he was walking down the hallway at CERN or something, and then he came up with the idea to figure out how to like.
yeah.
So what exactly like did he just, I don't know, smash some particles together? Was there a exotic setup or?
There is, and he actually there's actually a nice link that talks about it. So
Yeah, go for it.
So some quark and gluon facts. There are 6 different. Oh yeah, we talked about this. 6 different kinds of quark. Up, down, charmed, strange, top, and bottom, which John mentioned earlier. And quarks are the only elementary particles to experience all the known forces of nature, and to have a fractional electric charge. And the last one being the interaction between quarks and gluons are responsible for almost all the perceived mass of protons and neutrons, and is therefore where we get our mass. So, some cool fun facts, I guess.
I think one of the other odd facts I wanted to sort of mention is like under Coulomb's principle, if you have like spheres of charge and you pull them apart, the attraction weakens, right? But for quarks, the thing is you can never actually see a quark by itself. In fact, like they always come in pairs for quarks, always, even like at high energies, and it's like nature forbids a quark to be by itself. So usually there's like such a high energy or such high potential energy that a particle can like pop up, and then you'll have another pairing. If anyone's interested, you can check out quantum chromodynamics, but that usually requires a good understanding of quantum field theory, and quantum field theory is it's no like easy subject. Learning about QFT is like going from special relativity to general relativity. So Ryan, what do you think I'm curious, what do you think the difference is between special and general relativity?
Oh man, from
or which one do you think came first? Like when Einstein was like coming up with which one do you think, special or general?
General relativity came first.
It's actually special. He came up with special first, and then later on, it's pretty easy to get them mixed up. So with special relativity, we usually talk about you or the object of interest moving in a straight trajectory. And if you know like just basic physics, keeping a straight trajectory means your acceleration is you have no acceleration. So you can still have velocity, but no acceleration. And no acceleration means your velocity remains constant. So if I'm going from Earth and then I go at 99% the speed of light, then I'm just going in a straight. That's special relativity that's reserved for zero acceleration. And if you want to learn special relativity, even in high school, you can understand it. It's very easy. The math is there are no integrals, there's no differential equations, no field tensors, nothing like that. It's very easy stuff. It's just wrapping your head around the fact that everything is relative. That's the whole point of it. But general relativity is when you start getting the really cool stuff. So now we have curvature. We can deal with varying acceleration. Your velocity changes over time. And that's where we can't say the math is nice, because then you have to worry about metric tensors and field equations. And even for me, like I know I have a very rough idea of what those are, but I can't say I've ever had to solve anything in the realm of general relativity, although I would very much like to.
Yeah, so that wraps up my article, John. I think we can go ahead and move on to yours.
Yeah, sure.
Finding out what RNA-DNA mix.
Prior articles, I think I remember talking about, do you remember Venus? I also talked, it was the project that was designed to simulate conditions in space in order to better understand how organic molecules could, interact in space. Do you remember that from the last episode?
Yeah. That was a good overview of what you talked about too.
Oh yeah, it's the second article, I think. because normally in our titles, right, we just pick the first articles we go with. Otherwise, the titles are going to get like way too long. So, so this article that I have kind of builds off this. This might not be the only article about this topic, but I think I've geeked out over this as well on the podcast. Is like how life came from the primordial soup. So like in the very beginning, science tells us that the early Earth had a bunch of like amino acids and ingredients for early life. It sounds like you want to say something, Ryan.
Oh yeah, when you say primordial Earth, I mean primordial soup. What does that just mean? Like the beginning of life? Is that what you?
Yeah. Oh. I should. That's an excellent point. I should clarify that. A primordial soup is a term for like the belief that so Earth in the very early, before there was any life, there was a lot of water, and Earth was still very young at the time. And this is after like the meteor showers and everything, and we have all this liquid matter, and inside the water there's a lot of amino acids. There are a lot of the ingredients for life are in that soup, and over time, through some still unknown chemical processes, the soup eventually became unicellular life, and then we've got to multicellular life, and then fish, and then the fish walked onto land, and then now we have life as we know it today. But primordial soup, good catch, Ryan, is the term that gets thrown around for describing the early Earth, when there was no life and it was just a bunch of bubbling water essentially.
Yeah, I never heard of that term before. So.
Yeah. Oh, really? Okay. It might. That term, there's like a story behind how it came about too. It's
But sort of
it's been around for a century, but
okay.
It's a fun analogy, right? It's primordial, it's just super old, and soup, because it really was a soup. I mean, it's just a bunch of amino acids and organic compounds, and over time, somehow these molecules assemble themselves in such a way as to give a rise to life as we know it today. So,
yeah.
All right, so. This article comes from Science Daily, and this discovery. The article is that it boosts the theory that life on Earth arose from an RNA-DNA mixture, an RNA-DNA mixture. So why that's relevant to you, and why that's even a huge thing in the news, I'll get to pretty shortly. But first, I should give credit where it's due. This was from the Scripps Research Institute, and the study was published in a chemistry journal. Which the name of the journal I can't actually pronounce here, Angenwatt Chemie. Maybe it's Dutch, but this is the article itself was published in Science Daily, and basically what they found is that there is a compound called diamidophosphate that was potentially present on Earth before life arose. So during the primordial soup, which could have actually helped knit the original DNA that may have led to the earliest life forms.
Okay.
So there is this compound. The acronym is DAP, D-A-P.
Okay, DAP. I'm going to say
DAP.
Yeah, DAP.
Yeah,
okay,
DAP.
Gotcha.
But this latest development kind of confirms the idea, or a new theory, that the first self-replicating molecules were mixtures of DNA and RNA. And the reason that's so important is because for decades, scientists have believed that the early world was only RNA. We thought that in the very beginning, life was all RNA. Ryan, do you want to kind of describe what the difference is between RNA and DNA? Just like the simplest thing you can come up with.
Well, shoot. DNA, as much as I know, is sort of contained in the nucleus, and it's going to be sort of the instructions on to build various proteins, or to build whatever it needs in the cell.
Right.
Whereas RNA needs it's floating around in the cytoplasm, and it needs a ribosome to adhere to it in order to sort of to add on the complete instruction. I don't know.
Right. No, you're so that's one use of RNA. RNA is like pretty like multi-purpose. Like even I think ribosomes are even made of like little bits of RNA as well. And then I think I talked about an article about microRNAs and how like miRNAs can be used to suppress certain genes and all that stuff. But
Okay,
Even
wait.
simpler than that, Ryan. Like,
Uh,
what's the difference in the structure?
yeah, the structure. Okay. I know RNA uh, contains like, oh man, I know DNA, deoxyribonucleic acid
Uh-huh.
versus RNA, which is ribonucleic acid. Or
Yeah, you're right.
you
But
have to remind me the structure. But I remember, yeah.
so DNA is double-stranded, right?
Okay.
It's like the helical staircase, but RNA is just it's like a half strand
Okay.
almost.
Yeah.
It's,
Okay.
so that's like visually. Actually, for those of you who are more well versed in chemistry and in biology, you will know there are other fundamental differences between the two. But for the purpose of this article, all you need to know is that RNA is sort of like just half of a DNA strand. It's safe to take this simplified model into your mind. So you would think, okay, DNA is two strands, right? It's two of these glued together. RNA is just a single strand. So in the early Earth,
Mhm.
like primordial soup, which one do you think would have been easier to randomly form, RNA or DNA? Like,
Well, thinking of it, RNA, because it's half the strand. So when you sort of think of building things, you start with like half and half, and then you merge them together, and to create something more complex. That would be
right.
my intuition.
Your intuition and a lot of biologists agree. Like the RNA world hypothesis was the belief that, okay, in the very beginning everything was RNA, and then over time DNA come up. But now, with this latest research, they're saying that maybe this wasn't the case, because RNA does have a problem where it's really easy for RNA to make copies of itself. And oh, it looks like
Oh,
Bishy
hey,
Bucky
fishy
has left
Bucky.
a
That's a cute teddy bear.
dropped. Yeah, some of these little bear, what do you call them, emotes, right? Twitch
Yeah,
calls them emotes. Okay,
emotes.
I'm once again, for those that are new to the podcast, I am very lacking. Like, I'm not too familiar with all this the Twitch terminology. Ryan's a lot better with the stuff,
You
but
got it. You got it. The emotes.
I'm learning. I'm learning. That's
Yeah.
that's what all this is about. But basically, the problem with RNA is it's really good for templating, right? That's good because mRNA, right? You use mRNA, you can like sequence, or not mRNA, but uh, it like for like not DNA replication. Like
Okay.
RNA is really nice for making another copy of itself. The problem is RNA is sticky. It's literally sticky. Like once you have a double strand, trying to pull it apart in the primordial soup, there are no enzymes at this time on Earth. So how do you rip the strand apart and make a new strand?
Oh,
How does it replicate, right? So that was the biggest objection to the RNA world hypothesis, because RNA is too sticky. You can't possibly
interesting.
have a molecule that can copy itself over and over. In fact, I know this is very debatable what the definition of life is, but most people will say that self-replication is one of the requirements for life to reproduce. So
Right.
that's why most people don't consider viruses as living.
Right.
Viruses can't reproduce by themselves. They have to inject their genetic material into a host cell, in which case then they can reproduce. That's the one thing they're missing in terms of self-replication. So with this development, let me pull up my notes here again. They're saying that maybe, so this is by Krishnamurthy, sorry, let me get the name here. I'm terribly sorry if I'm butchering this name here. Ramanarayanan Krishnamurthy, who's the studies senior author. He's a PhD and associate professor of chemistry at the Scripps Research Institute. He had his doubts as well. And now, with the discovery or this proposal of a diamidophosphate, they're saying that the early world, the primordial soup, might have used a DNA RNA combo.
So both of them are existing at the same time?
Sort of.
Sort of?
It wasn't really like you had a whole DNA strand or a whole RNA strand.
Mhm.
The article calls them chimeric molecules, after the kind of, I think, the Greek myth about the chimera, which is like this really crazy
Ooh.
mixture of animals. Or it's like one animal with like a head of one animal and the body of another and the tail of
Oh.
a chimera. Yeah, you can look
Yeah,
that
I've
up.
never heard of that.
I think it's a Greek myth, but basically these chimeric molecules were the predecessors to like pure DNA in the real world, in the current as in life as we know it.
Wow.
So because these chimeric molecules don't require enzymes to reproduce, which is perfect because in the early primordial soup there were no enzymes. At least as far as we know, there were no enzymes. So they're saying that DAP could have helped knit together this kind of RNA DNA mix, which would have helped early life form on Earth.
Okay, and what is this DAP? What's it? Is it like an enzyme, or is it a? I'm not sure if you brought that
I
up.
think it's more of a catalyst. I would
Okay.
argue, by definition, it sounds more like a catalyst, a
I see.
diamidophosphate,
Phosphate. Huh.
DAP, diamidophosphate.
Okay.
And so I mentioned, like I kind of hinted in the beginning, why is this important to to the both of us and to our audience? Like, why should normal people worry about this or care for it? And the head professor of the study, he actually says that this is a great way to help with DNA replication without the need for enzymes or enzymeless DNA replication. Ryan, have you ever heard of PCR before, or like the PCR method?
No, no, I don't think so. Might have forgotten from bio, but
it is a bio-related term, so
okay.
you're right there. It's known as the polymerase chain reaction.
Oh, okay, yeah, I remember this word.
Yeah, there we go. Like if you imagine like crime scenes, right? Like maybe there's the someone left a strand of hair. How do you get enough DNA to further study it? You need to duplicate that DNA. So PCR requires using a DNA polymerase in a kind of hot water bath, and over time you rinse and repeat. So the number of DNA molecules grows, and PCR is used in a lot of COVID-19 tests as well to duplicate the genetic material. But the problem is the polymerase enzymes are pretty sensitive. They're fragile. So he's proposing that maybe in the future we can use stuff similar to DAP to not have to use enzymes for DNA and RNA replication and fabrication. So if you're making a custom strand, you can use DAP to kind of help you. And DAP is not as sensitive to as enzymes because it's just like a solid compound.
Wow, that sounds really cool. I remember PCR from bio, from forensic studies. They needed to replicate like a really small, it's as small as DNA. If they just get that, they can be able to just duplicate that, and then find the target. That's such a useful technique too. If you think about it, like just to track down on individuals with a small sequence, and then be able to
any dead skin, hair, anything that has just a little bit of DNA. PCR can help amplify that. So
that's really beautiful about like sort of sequences. You can repeat them and then sort of create something. Create sort of the original, well, not the original product, but and the forensic, you can create who the person was or their DNA.
Right. Yeah. Right. It's I think.
Go ahead.
But I think it hints to the sort of why I think this is so cool. Understanding how these molecular structures, which literally came out of almost nothing, right? You just had this soup of amino acids, and somehow over thousands and millions of years, in the very early days, the universe, or no, what were you gonna say, Ryan?
I would say billions. Add on to your millions. I think it's like 4 billion years ago was it was prokaryotes were found.
Okay. Well, I mean, from the other way around. So from the soup to the prokaryotes. So I would imagine it could have been 1 billion. I wouldn't be surprised. I'm not sure what the exact time scale is, but I just think it's so cool how over time the universe or physics or chemistry, just these natural forces of nature figured out, RNA and DNA are the best ways to contain information and to allow it to replicate, to introduce variation. It's just so universal, and it really is, the blueprint for life. It's truly remarkable.
And they just use, like AG, CT?
Yeah, yeah, GC. I always remember it as GCAT because guanine pairs with cytosine and adenine pairs with thymine. So
Yeah,
GCAT.
and that even goes into like mutations, right? Like even in, we see it in today with the COVID strain that's all over the news about this new mutation that came out that's supposed to be
Right.
and like it's just crazy how different mutations of a certain gene sequence can create such variations, in life, like with animals, with you, me, and how we
Yeah, I
create all
mean,
these different personalities. Yeah.
yeah, most of the time, these mutations don't really do anything. Like most mutations are harmless, but occasionally, like it's really cool how DNA is very accurate,
Uh-huh.
but the idea of evolution, right? Like you will have these mutations, but eventually you'll get a mutation that is advantageous, which makes it easier for you as an animal to reproduce and pass on that mutation for future generations because you have the upper hand in terms of competition.
And I think that goes with like Charles Darwin, right?
Yeah, yeah,
His idea with the birds and all the different islands,
right,
different
on the
beaks.
Galapagos
Yeah.
and the HMS Beagle. Yes.
Yeah. And that really, I mean, that's talked heavily in biology. It must be so amazing though to find that passion and like follow it to with when he was studying the Galapagos Islands, to be able
Oh yeah.
to come up
I
with
mean,
these like explorations and findings. Wow.
but keep in mind, I mean, when Darwin came back with his findings, he was humiliated.
Right.
It took decades before anyone was willing to say like, you know what, Darwin was, and now, I mean, if he could see the impact of his work, I'm sure, it's always one of the great shames of science, right? There's so many brilliant minds, and in their generation, their work is like mocked or derided. No one's willing to believe them. And it's only until decades after they're dead that now we realize like, you know what, you were right.
Yeah. I mean, with Galileo, right? That's like another good
Oh
example.
yeah,
Of
heliocentrism. Nobody, because it went against the church,
Yeah.
and the church was willing to prosecute. Yeah, so
that was a big factor of like this church. They were
right,
sort of
religious persecution. But
Yeah.
I think one of the things that touches me, for someone, I consider myself agnostic. So I mean, if I don't like vehemently go out of my way to try and disprove there is a God, but at the same time, I'm not entirely willing to accept that there is one. But I know Isaac Newton, once said that he didn't. I think it was Newton. I hope I'm saying this right. But his goal in studying science wasn't to try and disprove Christianity or God. It was to actually appreciate God's work and how he had made the universe and created. And I thought that was really beautiful. Like it's a really wonderful way of integrating the two, because I don't think this may be a very liberal standpoint on this. I don't think science and Christianity should be mutually exclusive, but maybe I'm treading into hot water there.
I know, right?
Anyways, yeah, I know. It's a very contested subject. I know. So,
but you brought that up, and I was about to bring that up too. That it's really beautiful the way Newton was able to combine the two.
Right. And I'm going to be honest. The more you learn like about science and math and physics and the world around you, it almost, to me, there are some things that are so elegantly made or that work so well that I am almost inclined to believe that just maybe there might be a higher force at work, just maybe. But it could also be random. I mean, we don't know. But that is up to like, your faith. And
John, would you consider yourself believing in coincidences, or do you think things happen for a reason?
Cool. That's a I don't know. The problem with that is like beliefs are very much subject to emotion, right? So sometimes you're really happy, like you got something, and you're like, yes, I deserve this because like X, Y, and Z. And other times when something bad happens to you, you're like, this must be the work of some higher power or something else. So I don't know. I honestly don't have a standpoint on that. What about you, Ryan? What do you think there are coincidences or?
Oh, okay. I think there doesn't exist coincidence. I think everything does happen for some reason. Just because I think I think of it as, it's just the way the world works, just the way. I mean, you brought up like how things are connected in different ways, like in physics, or like when you map, or when we study like plants, the way they grow, it's or snails, the way they shape their shell into like a fractal shape, or the reason why certain animals thrive in certain environments. Well, I guess that goes into evolution, but or the way like I don't know, things just align in certain ways that it almost
they're
seems
just
as
like
if why like it's just so beautiful that there could be someone
some underlying. Yeah, it's I know exactly what you're
like
describing.
even with the we talk about neutrons, protons, electrons. You know, if we didn't have one of those, we wouldn't.
Right. I
We
mean,
wouldn't even
how
be
would
here.
it?
You know.
What alternative is there exactly?
Yeah.
Or I think what's even really cool is like I think there are only 25 amino acids. I want to like there's only a fixed number.
Right.
But look at the amount of diversity of life on Earth. Like like we have humans, prokaryotes, parrots, turtles, and it's amazing. And all of these things use DNA and have this sort of universal template. And it is it's an absolutely wonderful thing to realize and to understand. And I think before we go into your next, or if we hold on, how much time?
I don't know.
I guess we have another 10 minutes.
So
yeah.
I can go into my article.
Yes. Before we do that, though, I think like just like one side note is like that's part of one of our goals for like the 0x2C podcast is to kind of give you guys this taste of the wonderful things that these developments in science technology have for us, and a greater appreciation of the world around us.
Yeah.
So
and
yeah.
again, we're just giving like our sort of 2 cents, our ideas.
Right.
We're not saying we're 100% right. We'll always be wrong and maybe something. And
yeah, or experts. I mean,
Yeah.
I think Ryan and I have even learned some new stuff from chat as well. I mean, we definitely pick up new things as well. So
we're learning as well, like along with you guys.
Yeah, and feel free to make corrections too. My goodness, like if Ryan and I ever make like a mistake, by all due means, we always strive to be as accurate as possible. It is never our intention to mislead or come up with some garbage on the spot.
But,
right. So yeah, how about we wrap it up?
Okay.
Wrap up today's episode with Ryan. How about you present your last article?
Oh, okay. Yeah. Let's see. So this article is gonna be looking into 6 incredible space missions to look forward to 2021. So I guess we'll sort of do like a little recap of space exploration in this year. So
okay.
Despite the COVID-19 pandemic, space exploration has still been able to achieve notable firsts in 2020. So the 2 being commercial human spaceflight and returning samples from asteroids back to Earth. And this is from John. John, actually, you talked about this in with the Hayabusa and
yes, Hayabusa 2.
Hayabusa 2. Yeah, my bad. Thank you. Yeah.
Because JAXA did launch a Hayabusa, and then the Japanese, I think they came up with another revision here.
So, John, have you heard of any future space missions for 2021?
For 2021, the one that I'm really looking forward to is the James Webb Telescope launch. That's super juicy to me because Hubble has definitely given all of humanity a wonderful, absolutely breathtaking view of where we are in the universe and what the rest of space looks like. But James Webb is like Hubble on steroids. Like we're gonna have even crispier photos of the universe. So I'm hyped for that.
No, me too. Yeah, honestly, with that telescope, I wonder what kind of pictures we'll get from space.
Yeah,
and that's actually in one of the. It's one of them. So great.
Okay, so, cool.
Yeah, so we hit one of them.
All right, 5 to go then.
Yeah. So let's continue on a little bit more about the James Webb Telescope. So it's the successor of the Hubble telescope, which John did mention in the previous episodes. That went pretty terrible, and in
the beginning it was a national embarrassment. I mean, that's millions of dollars of our taxpayer money.
Yeah, and
for the mirror, they screwed that up on the first launch. So
Yeah, and so this telescope is supposed to be launched on the Ariane 5 rocket on October 31st.
So Ariane 5 is not a NASA. It's not NASA. That is ESA, right?
I didn't search that. I just know it's an Ariane 5 rocket, but I
Okay,
think you're
so
probably right
but
on that.
I'm pretty sure Ariane 5 is kind of one of the flagship rockets of the ESA, so the European Space Agency.
Oh yeah. Okay, that's right. The
Okay, that's
ESA,
interesting.
is that what it's?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, the ESA, the
Okay.
European Space Agency. Yeah.
Cool. Okay. Yeah. So I think that's right. Um. Oh, and so I guess a little fun fact: this telescope is 14 years late, and
14 years
it's
late.
14 years late, and has cost us
Holy
roughly
smokes.
10 billion in US dollars after apparent underestimates and overrun to those similar to the Hubble. So, yeah.
Oh my goodness.
But we'll get those high def pictures. Hey.
Yay, let's go. Hubble, in the beginning it was a mess, but I still really think it was cool how they were still able to repair Hubble with
Yeah.
corrective optics and
That's right.
salvage that project.
Yeah, it's what you do from the failure,
Right.
To make up for it.
Right. And I mean, we've learned something from it too. I guess now NASA knows, like, okay, we got to be more stringent on how these mirrors are contracted and manufactured. But yeah.
So from the Hubble telescope, we were able to get pictures, but what sort of caused an issue was grabbing faraway galaxies, and there was a gas cloud maybe in front of the galaxy, so it would cover up the galaxy behind it. So, but with with the James Webb telescope, it's going to have infrared wavelength, I guess, image, and so
Oh,
it's
okay.
gonna block out those gas clouds. So we'll get that really those
Nice.
good pictures.
So
And
we have it sounds like we have a wider spectrum available to us for solar observation,
exactly.
or for stellar, not solar, stellar
Stellar.
observation.
Yeah. And so this telescope is 2.7 times bigger. So it's 6.5 meters in diameter versus the Hubble's, which was 2.4 meters in diameter.
Is that
So-
the mirror diameter, like the rear
Yeah.
mirror?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Let me clarify. Yeah, the mirror. And so so this obviously help better resolution and get those finer grain details for us Earthlings. That just want to see what's out
Nice.
there. And so
Yeah, I'm excited.
So some goals of these telescopes are to take pictures of the galaxies, of course, but they are focusing at the edge of the universe. And the reason why is because this may help us find out what the origins of life, and as well as look at other stars, planetary systems. But yeah, I think that's super cool because getting a picture of the edge of the universe is sort of like
Oh wow, the edge of the okay. So I guess you should say the edge of the observable universe,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Like
yeah.
I mean, there's probably plenty that we can't. At least I don't think we can quantify how big the.
universe actually is.
Yeah, but
Yeah, so when I say edge, it's like sort of fun throwing out like edge, quote unquote.
no, definitely,
Yeah.
definitely. I see what you mean.
Yeah. So that's the James Webb Telescope. Now we're going to go into the Artemis one. Wait, no, Artemis. Yeah, Artemis 1. I was going to say something else. But this is the first flight of the NASA-led International Artemis program to return astronauts to the moon by 2024. So this project is basically going to go out from Earth. It's going to go to the moon, orbit around the moon, and then come all the way back to Earth's orbit, and then hopefully land safely in the oceans. And so it's going to reach a maximum distance from Earth of 450,000 kilometers. And it's the farthest into space any spacecraft has flown. So that's pretty poggers to me. And yeah. So, and there's actually a really cool YouTube video of this. And they simulate it with some nice 3D graphics. So for those that are interested, on YouTube, search up Artemis 1, and you'll find like the mission for it. It's really cool. And so now on this Artemis 1, there's the Orion capsule. Have you heard of that, John? On the Artemis?
I might have. I'm
Okay.
vaguely familiar. Like I know the goal is to get to the moon. Again, I mean we already did this stuff during the Cold War, but once the Cold War kind of ended, there wasn't really as much motivation to for space exploration.
That's right. And on top of that is going to the moon and like coming back right, and land.
Okay, so when you say go to the we're not going to land on the moon. We're just
No.
going to orbit and then we're going to come back.
Right.
Okay. So it's sort of like a the first ever mission was just orbit the moon, come back. But I think eventually the plan is that we will have someone go on the moon, and then eventually I don't know, a base there, or maybe not under Artemis 1, but I think it's an implied goal that eventually we will have more consistent travel between Earth and the moon.
Yeah. So yeah, that's the future goal. And we said it with SpaceX already, So that's pretty
Oh, nice. Okay.
exciting. Yeah. So the Orion capsule is going to be it's literally like, so you know how rockets are super tall. The Orion capsule is literally it's the part of the rocket that's like the very tip, almost to the tip.
Yeah, it's a lot of I didn't realize this when I was younger, but the huge all of it is really just rocket fuel. Like you need that thrust to break from Earth's gravity. It's nuts.
Yeah. Like I would say 90% of the rocket is the rocket fuel, and the small 10% is what actually houses people, or like anything else. So this Orion capsule is supposed to house 4 astronauts and be able to return from the trip. So that's going to be pretty cool to see humans be able to orbit and then safely come back.
Oh, I wish we could as a species do more space exploration. I watch a lot of Star Trek. I'm at that point in time, we've explored so much of the galaxy, but we're born in this time where we're just beginning to reach back to the moon. And I remember, Ryan, have you played Halo before, the video game?
Yeah, I think you asked me that. Yeah,
okay,
one of the episodes.
I'm vaguely familiar with the early history of so it's Earth as the United Earth Government, the UEG, and how Earth expanded, and we have colonies or cities on the moons of Jupiter and all that stuff, and you know what I mean, Ryan? It can't come soon enough. I'm itching to be able to do space travel as easily as we do airplanes or boats.
We're close. I would say we're close. I would say definitely I would see that in our lifetime. It's kind of weird.
We're too old.
Yeah, it's kind of awkward. It's really awkward time, I think, for us.
Oh yeah,
we're
definitely.
We're at after Cold War. We're sort of stuck. I don't know.
The U.S. had plans to go to Mars. I think it was in another document that came out. But after the moon, I think NASA and the government were like, okay, once we get to the moon, we're gonna go for Mars. That's the next target. And it was 1978 or 1980.
Oh,
that was their targeted. Yeah, but after the Cold War, we're like, okay, we've I guess later on in the war, we've proven to the Soviets we are the the United States is the superior global force now. And we don't want to sink any more money. And ever since then, if you look, I think it's pretty depressing. If you look at the budget for NASA, they keep cutting. You rarely ever hear yes, NASA's getting a bonus. When have you ever heard NASA's getting more funding? It's always the other way around. Okay, now we're cutting more and more money from this agency, which is pretty sad.
Yeah. But to be devil's advocate, there's always that argument. Well, we need to fix what's on Earth before we go to the
right. So. That is true. But at the same time, there's more than enough proof that shows that funding NASA actually you get a return on investment as well with the new technology that comes out, and you're hiring people as well, and so it's not. But I see the argument. It is not wrong to argue that that money could have been used for social welfare programs or for domestic development, so on and so forth. Absolutely.
All right. And so sort of to wrap up the Artemis 1, this mission is scheduled to happen in late 2021. So
late 2021. Okay.
Oh yeah, and let me clarify this: they're not launching people to be inside of it. So this is really just going to be the rocket and to see if it comes back safely. So this is without humans.
It's the SpaceX. So is this supposed to land upright? Is that the goal?
No.
Is it a reusable? Oh, okay. It's just a dummy test, right?
Yeah. It's just dummy test.
Okay, cool.
They're trying to land the Orion back onto Earth.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
Yeah. So with this, since it's NASA led, which is interesting because a lot of the things they're not really trying to preserve, what Tesla does is try to preserve the rockets that go out and make it land back.
Right.
Tesla,
I think it's too much overhead. I think for the deadline 2024, I can understand like, okay, just like get it to work and we'll call it, like we'll say like, this is a good milestone. But wow, okay.
Yeah. So the third one, well, this sort of mixes in a couple more, but the Mars mission, and they're planning to send some rovers. So in February, this upcoming February, so like next month, Mars is going to receive a flotilla of
A flotilla.
flotilla.
Okay.
Sorry.
No, it's all good. It's
Flo-
all
uh,
good.
of terrestrial robotic guests from various countries. The first one being the United Arab Emiratis Al Amal, or Hope. Spacecraft is the Arab's world's first interplanetary mission, and it is scheduled to arrive in Mars orbit on February 9th. And it's going to spend 2 years monitoring the planet's surface and weather/atmosphere.
Wow. Okay.
And so then the other country is China, and they're going to be sending their Tianwen-1, consisting of one orbiter and a surface rover. So that's interesting.
Okay.
I wonder how that deploys. They're going to have an orbiter and then a rover too.
I think the U.S. has done that before, haven't they? Like I
Yeah.
think earlier Mars doesn't the orbiter act almost like a relay? Like it's like a radio relay?
Oh, I didn't look into too deep into it.
I'm willing to argue like that's the purpose of having the orbiter because there's no way, or at least I don't think there's a way that the rover by itself can
send out those signals.
Right. So we send it to the orbiter, and the orbiter can amplify and then send it to Earth.
That's right. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. And so China's goal is for the rovers are to map out the mineral composition of the surface and search for any subsurface water deposits.
Oh wow! Okay.
On Mars, yeah. And so the third one is NASA's Perseverance rover, and it will land at Jezero crater. Hope I said that right. On February 18th, so next month, to search for signs of ancient life, which may have been preserved in the clay deposits there. Which that would be really cool if we, find ancient life on Mars. That would be insane.
I mean, there have been. I know it's been like hypothesized, right? Like early in Mars's history, there was water, and then the water evaporated, and Mars became kind of this dead planet. And I've heard the counter argument too, like maybe the water wasn't there long enough for life to form, so there may not be any life there. Have you ever heard of this? There was an incident that happened before. This wasn't with Mars rocks. I think it was with. It could have been with Mars rocks, or it could have been with lunar rocks. But NASA got the sample of rocks and they put it under a microscope and they got super excited because they thought they saw like bacteria, a dead living thing, on dead cells on the rocks. And then it turned out it was because they didn't handle it well enough. So it got contaminated.
Debated.
Yeah, so I was like, oh man, you really played yourself this time.
Oh my gosh. Someone didn't wear gloves or spat on it.
I forget what the exact story was. It was like a super small error, I think. But
wow, they got us. Oh, they didn't get us because we found out. But
yeah.
So the last one being the Chandrayaan-3. Is it Chandrayaan?
Is it? Wait, what is this Indian or is this what is
the Indian?
Oh, I wouldn't know the proper pronunciation here.
Yeah. But going for my best bet, Chandrayaan-3. If I'm wrong, chat always if you guys maybe know. But in March 2021, the ISRO, or the Indian Space Research Organization, is planning to launch their third lunar mission. So in 2008, the Chandrayaan-1 was one of the first missions to confirm if there was any evidence of water on the moon. But unfortunately, less than a year, they lost contact to that rover, and they also sent another one. So the Chandrayaan-2, but they also lost contact to that. So this is the third one, hoping for the best for that rover.
Hopefully.
And that wraps up all of the 2021 space missions that are.
Well, it looks like we've got a lot. Like there's definitely a lot going on, and I guess we're both really excited to see where what results these missions will have, and fingers crossed, Ryan. We'll get to the point where we got colonies on the moon and on other planets, and who knows?
Yeah, in our lifetime. That's really
right.
What I'm hoping for. Too.
Interstellar travel. I always love the like in movies they have like with the idea of stasis, right? Like, okay, go to sleep for like 10 years or something, and then you wake up and you're at
Yeah.
like the other planet.
Yeah. When they sort of freeze you in those
Yeah, they
capsules, I found
they
that.
put
Yeah.
you in this like metabolically reduced state, so your body doesn't consume as much energy or as much nutrients, and you're sleeping until you. But this is like pre. Other universes we somehow figured out faster than light travel. So like in Star Trek, you're like, warp 9, and then boom, you just
Zoom in.
teleport. Yeah, you're just zooming.
Or like the theory of wormholes, and if we hop into this wormhole, we'll end up in over here.
Yeah, or if we can create. I mean, a lot of sci-fi talks
Oh
about like
yeah.
subspace or like another dimension, or I love Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. I think I
That sounds
mentioned that
familiar.
before.
It's a movie, right? Obviously.
It started out as a novel, and then it was
Oh.
adapted into a movie.
Okay.
The Hitchhikers, and they had this cute. This definitely isn't a spoiler for any of you if you have not seen it. But there's a thing they call the infinite improbability drive, which it like the apparent mechanism is that it takes all these improbable events, and eventually it gets to like the one where you're like at your location or something, and it's a very the whole movie has a very kind of goofy appeal to it. I'd strongly encourage any like sci-fi aficionados to
Yeah.
check it out.
If Chat has any like favorite sci-fi movies, what are your favorite?
Yeah, I mean,
But
before
it's
we
Chat's
decide to wrap up the episode, if there are any like yeah, I think
Sci-fi.
Star Trek's always been like a huge favorite of mine, though.
Yeah.
I think mostly because I know like for the latest series, Discovery, it's a lot of action, but the thing I always admired about Star Trek was it has a lot of diplomacy. Like, okay, how would you interact? Like there's on the brink of war. Like Jean-Luc Picard has to come in and kind of negotiate so it's not all like laser beams and
Yeah. Star
action
Wars,
and
I guess.
Star Wars. Yeah, Star Wars is but Star Wars is still a really awesome series.
Classic.
Although I know like the consensus on the Disney movies, you know what I mean? Like once Disney took over, some people are like,
Oh.
this is terrible, and others are like, this is actually pretty good. It's a huge divide. But
Yeah. I fell in love with Star Wars, like for my first sci-fi sort of when I was a
oh,
kid.
nice.
I got really into those Legos, Star Wars Legos.
Oh yeah,
I would buy
there's a
all
lot
the
of Lego
kits.
merch, huh?
But it's so expensive. So I would only buy like the $10 ones, the small ones,
Oh, okay.
small kits. But they're so fun.
Yeah.
And then I would customize them. I would watch YouTube videos on how to customize your clone to make them look like certain generals.
What was I thinking of? Shoot. Oh, Alien. Like, are you familiar with that series, Ryan? Just
I've seen it like around.
The
I've
Chest
never
Buster.
Yeah. You talked about this. I haven't seen that movie. I still haven't seen that movie.
Oh, you gotta
I've seen
rewatch
clips
it,
though.
Ryan.
It's super nasty though. The way it just busts out his
Yeah, it's nasty, but that's sort of like I think I like it so much because it's such a dystopian view of what aliens would be like to us. Like I think
Yeah.
in sci-fi there's like two huge splits, right? One of them is that aliens are super friendly. Like we make contact with them, and the aliens are like, "Oh, yo, like it's nice to meet you guys. We're super excited to communicate with you." And the other half of sci-fi is like aliens hate us. The moment they see us, they're gonna destroy us. They're gonna wipe Earth
man.
off the face of the universe. But yeah, I just love the Sigourney Weaver's acting is absolutely phenomenal across all the Alien movies, and I'm a huge fan of her and of the just of the series in general.
Yeah. I was gonna say, it's amazing how you people memorize actors' names. For me, I always after I watch a movie, I don't remember the actors' names.
Oh,
Only very particular movies, I guess I would remember them. But yeah, I think it's just
okay.
bad with names.
Why don't you list? Hold on, how much more? Okay, well, I think for the last like 1 or 2 minutes, why don't you list off the actors like off the top of your head?
Oh
You
my
list.
gosh, you put me in the spot, John. Now I'm gonna forget everything. You can't do this.
No,
to me.
no. Okay, it's fine. It's fine. I'm just curious. Like, how many do you know?
Oh, Michael B. Jordan, Chadwick. Wait, Chad Boswick. Oh man.
Chad Boswick. Chad Boswick, guys. He's another actor. I think it's Chadwick Boseman, dude.
Oh, thank you.
Chadwick Boseman.
See what I'm saying? Like I just mix his name. But man, it's because I watched Black Panther recently with yeah, rest in peace, Chadwick.
Yeah,
Boseman.
definitely a huge loss.
Yeah, But it's because I recently watched Black Panther because it was so good. I rewatched it. What else? That was two, right? I gave you two.
Yeah.
Off the top of my head,
I'm gonna be honest, Ryan. I probably know a similar number to you. Like, if you put me on the spot, I'd probably like. Let's see, who would I? Harrison Ford, Tom Hanks, Sigourney Weaver, um,
Charles Darwin. I'm just kidding.
Charles. I mean, yeah, he was an actor. The large majority of society thought he was acted stupid
Got him.
when he came back with his research. But I mean, now he's revered, sort of the pioneering father of one of the pillars of biology. But anyways, I think we can call it a night, Ryan.
Okay.
I think Ryan and I are still very keen on continuing 0x2C, and if you have any themes you want us to look into, or any topics in particular you might want us to emphasize for an episode, feel free to put it in a chat, or we do have Instagram, so you can DM the topic of interest. We always announce when our streams are going on, and I need to start posting like actual content on that account.
All right. Well, yeah. Thank you guys for listening today's podcast. As always, stay safe, take care, and we'll see you hopefully next time.